When I started studying people trying to make career change, the thing that really struck me the most about why they were having such a hard time doing it, why they kept getting stuck, was not because of the financial risk or the uncertainty or the fear. It was because even though they could tell you exactly what they didn't want to do anymore, exactly what they didn't like about what they were doing, they couldn't tell you what they wanted to do instead.
I didn't have a very specific idea. I knew I didn't really enjoy banking, and not because of all the hours or all the hard work. It was more, I looked at the people who were there a few years ahead of me, and I was thinking, I do not want to have their lifestyle. I don't want to turn into them.
At that point in time, I just had this feeling, I'm doing too little problem solving. There were just these random thoughts in my head, which I don't want to go out and do this bit.
The trick in getting this right is understanding that the way we think about what we're good at is also very limiting, because if we think about what we're good at, we tend to think about it in terms that are very narrow, functionally specific, very much tied to the job that we've been doing. And one important exercise for people to do as they start thinking about what next is to think about not these narrow skills, but portable competencies that can be applicable in a range of different contexts, and really learning to conceptualize what it is that you do and you do well.
The corporate things that I was being proposed were just kind of retreads on what I'd already done, because it's a classic headhunter thing. You look for someone who looks rather similar to, their experience looks like the job you're trying to fill. But that's not what I wanted to do.
You have to first discover what it is that you want to do. You have to meet people. You have to do a more random kind of search. You have to engage in a discovery process. You have to experiment. It takes longer, but it's a completely different search process. And people who try to go about it analytically, methodically, just like we're trained to do, just have a much harder time of it.
At INSEAD, my first two periods, I really still had the mindset of like, I gotta do something, serious. I gotta have to really focus on something that's, I gotta build a career. And so I was thinking everything from kind of consulting to big company jobs. But then I started meeting some of my fellow students who were in those worlds, and I was like, that's just not me. I don't think I should be doing that. This didn't fit my personality. You
meet some people and you say, oh, I'd be good at that, or I'd be interested in that. Let me pursue that a little bit further. Often people start somewhere, but sometimes that doesn't pan out, or there's no job available, or they can't make money doing it. And so they have to start a search that is for some other approximation.
I said yes to lots of things to start with, and 2 or 3 didn't work out, and that was fine. And I actually gained lots of experience right from the start of things that didn't work, and that was great, actually.
They're flirting with lots of different ideas, except they have been told that you're not supposed to do that you're supposed to know exactly what you want and go for it. And so it's almost as if they can't even express the reality, which is the whole range of things that they're interested in exploring, almost like a portfolio, almost like a venture capitalist. Some of them are going to develop and some are not, and they really do need permission to go about it that way because it's ultimately more effective.
So I was avoiding being as random as I was, and then at one point I embraced it. I said, look, this is the way it's going to work, because it actually had been working okay for me, even though I was kind of scattered in my job choices.
Ideally, you explore things while you still have the safety of a job. Now, sometimes that works out, and I really did see many more people than you would imagine doing moonlighting and consulting and starting up a business or being on a board of something that then becomes a bigger pursuit. That it really does happen a lot, but some jobs don't permit that at all. And in those cases, I've seen people organize an extended vacation, organize a sabbatical. I've seen them save up so that they can actually quit and have a window of time.
My advice would always be figure out how to do it a little bit in the side while you're doing whatever it is it's paying the bills. I absolutely believe in trying to dabble in it as much as you can so that you ease into it. But that's not how I did it, so I don't think that it has to be that way.
And so I went to McKinsey and I said, I want to go teach at INSEAD. And I had officially been working part-time because I had kids, and I, of course, worked more, so I had a few months left. And of time I had already worked and not been paid. I said, I want to invest those months to really create the material for this course. And McKinsey was very supportive. They said, well, that's a great idea because it's also for them to have it all kind of condensed.
I really try to encourage people, go work with someone who's doing something like you do on the weekends. And especially if you're interested in the wine business. That's my busy time is the weekend, so I'd love an extra hand. I worked at another winery before I opened up, and it really taught me a lot about the rhythms of the day or kind of the rhythms of the season. And it's just one thing when you do the exercise on paper. It's just another thing when you go to try and execute.
During my private equity time, reading through a lot of business plans and how people were running their business really got me thinking about doing my own business. So I decided when the opportunity came up, I joined a couple of friends as partners to open up a chain of fast casual restaurants in Wuhan.
One of the things people get very hung up about is, will I be as good in a different role as I am right now? And it's great to be excellent, but I can do this job in my sleep and I'm getting bored, and I will definitely be bored down the line. But at the same time, I don't want to give up that level of edge.
But if you are well paid, and I was exceedingly well paid at the bank, I was the blue-eyed boy of the chief executive. I could go when I wanted to, where I wanted to. I didn't have to account for anything. I had one great position after another, and I did just about anything that one can do in a commercial bank. So why do you throw that away, especially when the new CEO offers you an opportunity that never comes the way of anybody?
I quit my private equity job, and I was based in Shanghai, taking the train or flying to Wuhan for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, setting up the restaurants, rolling my sleeves up, actually taking orders from people, delivering noodles, helping to, clear off the dishes. I just this was so different from what I was doing 3 years ago, talking to CEOs of companies, how many million do you need? It was just it was a huge transition.
One of the things that most keeps people stuck is their friends and family, the network around them. And it's not that they don't mean well for the person, it's just that they can't, most of the time, they can't imagine you doing something else. They just don't see you that way. They see you historically. And then the other thing that gets tricky is that if they're close, they're invested in you being where you are. That's what you've negotiated. If you're the breadwinner or a breadwinner, they're invested in that not being put at risk. If they're a mentor or a peer at work, they're invested in you staying where you are. Oftentimes for people, at even unconscious level, it sets off a tricky dynamic because they've also wondered, should I stay or should I go? And maybe they've made the choice to stay and they feel quite ambivalent about you spreading your wings. We
looked at our numbers, we looked at our spending pattern, and I still have the SWOT thing that we did with my wife at home, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we still have that. We did that in September 1987. And we did it in the evening, after dinner. The kids were down. And we came to the conclusion that we could survive. No cleaners. I would have to clean the windows, and I would have to push the lawnmower around. That we could survive 2 years and no more.
I always tell people, I think that the best is when you're a couple. If one is entrepreneurial and one has the good job. And we messed up because we are both have our own businesses. And so at our house, we're always arguing about, it's one thing, you know, I assume most normal couples argue about, you know, do we have the money to go on a vacation, or, you know, did you spend too much on clothes? When we argue about, you know, did you spend too much money on winemaking equipment?
People always want to know if it's going to work and if it's going to be successful and what's the probability. And they always ask me, you know, what percentage of the people did you study end up thinking that they did the right thing? And, you know, it's very hard to quantify those things. It's hard to quantify it because people leave because they can't stand it anymore and because the options that they thought they had are actually closing. You make calculated risks. And what people always forget is that there's a big risk to just staying where you are. And the biggest risk of all is staying where you are without exploring your market value, without understanding, you know, where you might be.
Follow your star. Follow your star. 6 months into having established my own business, I knew it would work. I never ever imagined that it would take off and grow the way that it did. But I knew that I would survive. And therefore, 6 months into it, I was kicking myself not to have done it 2 years earlier.